mobilize sustainable foreign and domestic investment by solving the regulatory environment to make it easier for businesses and more attractive, and to improve communication with private sector leaders, including so many in this country who have a wealth of knowledge and experience and tackle some of the challenges confronting this country. I also encouraged government leaders to work to promote entrepreneurship among women and in historically marginalized communities. There is an enormous source of economic growth potential that in too many places is still going untapped. I also know that Nepal is already committed to growing its tourism sector, and you have a new evangelist in me. I'm going to be talking for quite some time about the run that I took this morning with Mira Rai, the stunning Kopan Monastery, the treasures at Patan Durbar Square, whether it's adventure tourism in the mountains that goes well beyond trekking, the spiritual richness, the cultural heritage, the history, the beauty. There's just so much here in this country that I know Americans and tourists from all around the world would benefit from enjoying. And so, again, we are very excited at USAID through our programming in the competitive economy domain to helping strengthen the tourism sector, which already accounts for roughly 8% of the country's GDP. But we think, given this bounty of resources and richness and the warmth and hospitality of the Nepalese people, that the tourism sector could be generating significantly more resources in the years ahead. As the Nepali people work to advance democracy, drive inclusive economic growth, and extend dignity to every person, they will have, just as they have had for the last 75 years, a friend and partner in the United States. That you can count on. And with that, I'm eager to take your questions. Thank you.
Administrator Power, I'm Fanindra. I work for the BBC. My question is, where does Nepal fits in the US policy towards South Asia? And you just mentioned that you would have further conversation with Nepali Prime Minister during the Summit for Democracy. So does it mean that he will be invited to attend the event if it is going to take place in Washington? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to look at my ambassador to confirm that it's, I believe, is already very much extended, and the summit will be held largely virtually, and I think that will give the Prime Minister the reforms and the implementation of the commitments that were made at the last summit, as well as to lay out what his plans are, also to strengthen the rule of in this country. And that really was the substance of the discussion I had with him earlier. Was, it can be tempting in every democracy to focus on, of course, naturally, is or the Prime Minister is, but I think all of us who are privileged to serve in public office as public servants, our most impactful investments are the investments we make in institutions, the institutions that will outlast us. And so that I think is where the emphasis was with the prior government when they made their commitments at the last Summit for Democracy. And of course, implementation always takes time, but it's an important roadmap. And we've been very heartened to see civil society leaders in Nepal also actively engaging to press for accelerated progress on the commitments that were made last time, while also presenting ideas for the new government about what they might wish to commit to and pledge to at this coming summit. In terms of Nepal and kind of where it fits, I mean, what I would say there is that I do think that the depth and length and scope of the U.S.-Nepali relationship speaks to friendship and partnership between our two peoples. And certainly from the U.S. side, our enduring commitment and the opportunity that every Nepali person seeks for themselves and for their loved ones. And I mention it or put it in these terms because there's no question they shifted during the Cold War, they shifted after the Cold War. Now there are different geopolitical dynamics that serve as a backdrop to anything that any country does anywhere in the world. But I would focus on the work, the work we do together, the impact of that work, whether on those 800,000 Nepalese farmers I mentioned, or those young people at the Adarsha school who are able to go back to the classroom and have access to state-of-the-art technology. I would focus on the way, in support, again, of your efforts. The United States came forward in the wake of the earthquake to help you build back in a manner that will make them less prone to destruction should calamity strike again. This investment by the United States in Nepal is not the product of any geopolitical dynamic. It is the product of the United States' commitment, proven, decade after decade after decade, to the welfare of the people out of this partnership and this friendship as well. Certainly I have on my visit, given the warmth and the spectacular way in which, when given even the slightest opportunity that Nepalis are famous for, and that determination and that resilience, the Nepali people take advantage of those opportunities. They insist that their democracy can be strengthened. They come out and they vote. In civil society, to press for the kind of inclusive and equitable growth that so many have aspired to for so long. So that is really our focus, the U.S. focus here. We think the model of development that works the best is one out of business. It is very rare that you visit a family or a country where people like the idea of receiving foreign assistance. They may need those drought-resistant seeds, but virtually, it's fair to say, it's a universal aspiration to be able to fend for yourself and your family. And what people long is really predicated on that idea that when given the opportunity, the dynamism of the people of this country will be unleashed, and assistance will recede, and the education country forward. And so an independent and sovereign Nepal is what we respect and with whom we partner. And our development model country should be Nepal. Why the conversations I have had here in my few days in the country have been aimed at hearing what we can do to support the Nepali vision for how that development should progress.
Thank you. Oh my God. I'm sorry. Thank you, Excellency, for this opportunity. Again, I think you touched upon a bit on the same question, but then I just would like to ask again. In Nepal, if you have seen, a section of people tend to see all US development support from the lens of security. And they kind of say that all the support that US is giving out of the geopolitical consideration. So is there any link between development assistance and the geopolitics that is undergoing in the broader Asia Pacific region and at the global level? Is there anything, is this just a perception or is this real? Thank you.
I come back to the point that I tried to make before, which is that the evidence of our concern for and commitment to the Nepali people for their own sake is 75 years worth of evidence to that effect. It is in roads and schools, and more will be in small and medium-sized enterprises that are able to get access to financing to expand their businesses. It is in the female professional class in Nepal that some of whom might have had access to a USAID program that might have just given them a little bit of confidence when they were younger to believe that they could in fact pursue their dreams of becoming a tech entrepreneur or a medical doctor. I think that the evidence lives in the hearts of so many of the Nepalis, at least that I met on my, again, relatively short visit, but also even in the encounter I had with the Prime Minister today, where he described being, at age 24, an agricultural worker who one of his first jobs was in a USAID program trying to help farmers expand their yields. In so many parts of this country, there are stories like this. It's incredibly inspiring for me, who is relatively new to USAID, to go out and to talk to people and to hear their memories of what things might have been like, and then maybe just a small infusion of support or technical assistance, or de-risking so that the private sector might feel comfortable doing this or that, can just move something in a positive direction. And again, you don't have to take my word for it that we care about the Nepalese people for their own sake. I really do think the history of the relationship between our two countries, and the fact that more and more we do get this question. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the first two questions were of this nature, that question marks have been raised. I think some of that stems from a problem that we deal with in the United States as well, which is rampant misinformation. And in general, all around the world, not just in Nepal, more and more kind of polarization. People sometimes finding issues that divide us rather than those that unite us. And then sometimes people get confused, but we believe in the United States that it is in the long-term interests of the American people for democracy and democratic citizens to be able to access social services, healthcare, education, for everywhere in the world, for the next generation to be better off than the generation before. And now, because of climate change, we also feel a historic responsibility, because we in the United States have been a major emitter of carbon, and countries like Nepal that have done very, very little to contribute to global warming are feeling the effects of that. So that too gives us a sense of responsibility to make these investments. But I think what you'll see is our work is definitely evolving. We try to evolve to meet new challenges like climate change, like Nepal's journey to middle income status. We want always to adapt. We want to bring the private sector in much more and be much more active in that space than maybe we were 10 or 15 years ago. But the enduring features of the relationship are partnership, respect, and a desire to see the Nepalese people choose their own development path.
Administrator, this is Jagdishwar Pandey from Kantipur newspaper. So my question is, you have explained that USAID has been contributing Nepal for the 6th decade. So how do you evaluate your journey in Nepal?
Our learning, yes. So maybe the way I will answer that question is talk about the way ahead, which I think is reflective of our learning. I think that you've heard me speak about the importance of inclusion and equality under the law, equality of opportunity. I think that we at USAID are trying also through outside organizations. And what is happening now is we are shifting to work more and more directly with local Nepali organizations. We are also increasing our government-to-government assistance. And this long ago, this was how USAID did its work in countries like Nepal. But what has happened back in Washington is there are a lot of requirements for compliance and a lot of paperwork. And it can be very complicated to enter into a grant or contracting relationship with USAID. So we are trying to streamline those processes, make ourselves more nimble, quicker, more flexible, and invest not only in development outcomes that we are trying to see tomorrow, but invest in the capacity of the organizations, the Nepali organizations, that we know are going to carry on this work long after we Americans may have cycled through and maybe gone back home. So that's one difference, I think, is more investment in local organizations, and increase where the conditions allow in government-to-government programming. We're doing more programming on financial management and of the nature that I mentioned in my opening remarks. You may know also that the vast majority of USAID's staff in Nepal are Nepali citizens. They are maybe engineers, they are public health professionals, they are economists, or they may have worked at USAID and developed such insight into small and medium-sized enterprises and who's who and where the greatest growth potential is. We are working within USAID to empower those individuals even more to make sure that they can rise according to their talent and be recognized as much as they should be. But also as we hire our Nepali staff, we also are going to look geographically beyond where we often hire and from communities that may not traditionally have been part of our USAID team, so as ourselves to be as inclusive as possible in the approach we take to development. And then the last thing I'd say, which is really, I think, a very important and necessary shift, is USAID has always, or for many years, let's say, USAID has sought to help communities and governments create the enabling environment that would make investment attractive. So we've worked and provided technical assistance, that is in itself kind of catalytic, where we might hear from a multinational corporation or a local Nepali bank, what the regulatory burdens are that make it unattractive to invest or to set up a business or to expand a business. And then we have worked in support of reformers to try to improve the enabling environment. So that has long been a part of our model. I think now, because with pandemics and climate change and supply chain challenges and Putin's invasion of Ukraine and the food and fertilizer prices that grow out of that, we recognize that we just need to do even more to make the private sector a partner in every country where we work's development journey. And so more and more, I'd say, if you ask for a lesson or at least a shift, it is to view USAID resources as catalytic, as resources that we leverage to try to get companies or foundations or the multilateral development banks or other donors to come in as well, so that every dollar we put in support of one of Nepal's development objectives, we try to multiply that dollar, because if we don't, we can't keep up with the economic headwinds that, or even just the single challenge of adapting to climate change that Nepal and many, many other countries are going through. So we feel that we have an urgent responsibility to take the public resources, the US government's resources, and try to multiply them by bringing in others who may not have previously seen themselves as development agents.
I am Praram Dahal with Kantipur Television, English News. Administrator Power, you've touched upon the issue of climate change. Can you please shed some light regarding the conversations you had with Prime Minister earlier today, in particular ways, because the impact of climate change is quite evident on children and women in Nepal. So was anything in particular discussed with your meeting earlier today with Prime Minister?
Well, I think, he spoke about climate change from the standpoint of somebody who really knows the land of this country, who started working in agriculture and knows the seasons and what is to be expected, or what for much of his life and much of everyone's life was to be expected, and just spoke with realism about how much has changed for the people who work the land today. And we talked a little bit about the horrible flooding that Nepal experienced last year, and now the ongoing drought and the concern that so many farmers have coming, starting last year and now coming into this year. And so I think it was just understood that with this changing climate, we need to embed, we collectively, with the Nepali people in the driver's seat and us in a support role and a partnership role, but we need to embed a consideration of these new climate dynamics into, for example, the government's agricultural reform agenda. We at USAID need to think about climate change across all sectors. We need to think about what young people are learning in our education programming. We need to think about digital technology and our work on IT in terms of also some of the early warning programming that USAID can offer through NASA and NOAA and other scientific agencies, which can empower the farmer to know what these changing seasonal weather patterns are going to mean. We can equip farmers through our Feed the Future program, with soil mapping and understanding of how to apply fertilizer, especially with fertilizer prices as high as they have been this last year. So, I think the detailed discussions about what the partnership, about how climate is embedded into virtually all aspects of our partnership, will be the conversations that our mission and our embassy will be having in the days ahead with the Prime Minister's relatively new team. But I think we had broad agreement that, unless we can build in resilience across our programming and bring in attention to and consideration of climate effects into all of our programming, some of the really important development gains that Nepal has made, will be at risk. So that is something that, in every country, we at USAID are having to do, is to sort of step back and say, okay, what is this now going to mean for our health programming? I mean, now, given that climates are different, mosquito patterns are different. We all know that the changing climate, many scientists believe, is going to cause a greater risk of future pandemics. Well, what does that mean beyond the support that we provided through vaccines and other COVID-19 assistance? How do we take, the partnership that was deepened through that work together, and also ensure that Nepal's health system is prepared in the horrible event that either a new variant of COVID-19 or a new virus altogether comes and endangers the lives of Nepali citizens. So I think that was the spirit of the conversation. It needs to be a design feature. President Biden, of course, as you know, is deeply committed to bringing down America's own emissions. The Inflation Reduction Act being the largest ever climate investment that the United States has made. But we know that for countries like Nepal, the effects are already being felt. And so we prioritize an adaptation and resilience mindset now across every sector, and that's what we look forward to working with the government to do as well.
Great, and last question.
Ajay, namaste, good evening. I am Janardhan Baral from Business News. There is a global debate on effectiveness of foreign aid. Since US is the first aid provider of Nepal, how do we evaluate the effectiveness of US aid in Nepal? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think that as my previous exchange indicated, we are seeking to evolve now that climate shocks are such a frequent occurrence, seeking to evolve not just what we do or which sectors we work in, but how we do it, to work more directly with our local partners and to take their lead to make sure that we are not coming in and ourselves from outside dictating how things will go, but that we are listening and learning and iterating. So I think that there is no question that the 75 years in which the United States and Nepal have been working together, the 60 plus years that USAID has been working to improve development has made a profound difference. I've heard that firsthand from so many of the people that I've engaged with. But, I think given the magnitude of these complex interlocking challenges and, the recognition that foreign aid alone is, number one, not the goal, right? It's a means to creating sustainable indigenous development. It's a nudge, right? It's not a solution. It's a support structure. But given the complex challenges that the traditional ways of providing assistance need to adapt, need to be more catalytic, need to bring in private sector actors. We've just at USAID created a new private sector engagement fund called the EDGE Fund, a $50 million fund where we've said to the world, to the private sector, if you have a development idea and a little bit of USAID catalytic resource would help you get that idea off the ground, and it stands a chance of improving health or education or digitizing or addressing climate change in some fashion, let's do a partnership. And so, again, I think foreign assistance has done tremendous good. It works the best when the ideas come from the communities in which we work, and when development actors are held accountable by those communities. It works the best when the design process is inclusive and the partners that we work with come from the broadest range of society, so that we are not perpetuating inequality inadvertently, but instead seeking to contribute to a more just and equal societies. And foreign assistance is at its best when it is self-reflective and self-critical and always open to new ideas and to constructive feedback. And so when we go out in the field and talk to our partners, that is what we ask for, that is what we expect. We want to abide by strict environmental safeguards. We believe that civil society has a critical role to play in development, not just government. And again, we believe that our ultimate objective is to see a country in which we have provided assistance become a trading partner. So to move from aid to trade, not to create dependence, but to encourage independence. And certainly that is the journey we are on together here in Nepal. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. If I could just ask you to exit that way, it'd be very helpful. Thank you.
तपाईँको थप प्रश्न भयो भने हाम्रो प्रवक्ताजी एनर्जीलाई र हाम्रो टिमलाई लेख्न सक्नुहुन्छ धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद थ्यांक यू